All right. Ready to tackle this IELTS listening section? I know if you're prepping for the exam, this is one part that can feel a little, well, overwhelming.
It definitely can be.
So that's what we're diving deep into today.
Awesome.
A podcast episode called Mastering IELTS Listening.
Catchy title.
Super catchy, and we're going to pull out those practical tips and strategies that can really help boost your score.
Yeah, what I noticed about this podcast was how much it stressed real-world listening skills. It's not just about memorizing vocabulary.
Right.
It's about understanding context, accents, and those unspoken cues that native speakers use, in everyday life.
I love that. They want to make sure that you're not just ready for the test, but you can actually use English in the real world.
Right, exactly.
So they break down the structure of the listening test, the 4 sections, and I'm curious, you've taken the test yourself. Did you find that those 4 sections really did get progressively harder?
They totally did. I mean, it starts off pretty approachable with conversations about everyday topics.
Like what?
Like booking a hotel or asking for directions.
Okay.
Then you move on to a monologue, still in a familiar setting, like someone's giving a talk at a community center or something. But sections 3 and 4, that's where things get real.
Okay, so section 3 throws you into more of an academic conversation.
Yeah, exactly. Like students discussing a project or a professor leading a tutorial.
And then, bam, that final section hits you with a full-on academic lecture.
The vocabulary gets more complex. The concepts are more abstract.
You really have to focus.
For sure.
I remember this podcast highlighted something that I hadn't really thought much about before. Those 10 minutes you get at the end to transfer your answers. Did you find that that was enough time, or did it feel rushed?
Oh, those 10 minutes are precious. And honestly, that's where a lot of people trip up.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, you've just spent 40 minutes intensely listening and taking notes, and then suddenly you have to meticulously transfer everything to the answer sheet.
Right.
It's so easy to make, silly mistakes if you're not super careful.
Oh, I bet. This podcast also emphasized knowing what types of questions to expect. But in your experience, what were some of the trickiest question types that you had to deal with?
For me, the most challenging ones were those that involved completing a diagram or a table.
Oh, those.
You have to listen for specific details, often out of order, and then figure out where they fit visually. It's a whole different kind of mental agility.
Yeah, that sounds tough. And then, on top of that, you have to deal with all those different English accents.
Oh, yeah.
This podcast really stressed that you might hear British, Australian, North American.
Oh, for sure.
Even a mix in a single recording.
A mix, yeah, it can happen.
That's crazy. So how did the podcast suggest preparing for this oral onslaught, I guess?
Well, first things first, you got to know where you stand.
Okay.
Take a practice test under timed conditions. See how you perform. Don't just take any old practice test, though.
Oh.
Use official IELTS materials.
Okay.
Or ones that are specifically designed to mimic the real exam.
So quality over quantity when it comes to practice tests.
Absolutely. And they were really big on daily immersion.
What does that mean?
Surrounding yourself with spoken English as much as possible.
Okay, so TV shows, movies.
Yeah, podcasts, even the radio.
But don't just passively listen.
Exactly. Jot down key points. Try to summarize what you're hearing. Even predict what the speaker might say next. It's about turning passive listening into an active mental workout.
Oh, I love that. But they also talk about, focusing on vocabulary, and not just any vocabulary, but the kind that trips people up.
Oh, yeah. The IELTS loves synonyms and idioms because they use a lot of paraphrasing to test your comprehension. You might hear one word in the recording and then see a completely different word with the same meaning in the question.
That's sneaky.
It is. So it's not just about recognizing individual words, but understanding their various meanings and how they're used in different contexts.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm curious, how much emphasis did the podcast put on note-taking during the listening section?
They actually highlighted that as one of the most important skills to master.
So it's not just about listening passively. You have to develop a system for taking effective notes.
Yeah, and they suggested practicing note-taking in different contexts, like during lectures or while you're watching documentaries. Train your brain to process information quickly and extract the key points.
Okay, so we've covered the format, the importance of knowing your weaknesses, and even some strategies for getting used to accents and expanding your vocabulary. What else did this podcast highlight as being crucial for success on the listening test?
Well, they had a whole section on tactical tips for acing the test itself.
Okay.
One that stood out to me was the importance of reading the questions before the recording starts. Did you do that?
I didn't, and I think that was a mistake. I was so focused on just being ready to listen that I didn't really take advantage of that prep time.
Oh, it makes a huge difference.
Does it really? Oh, yeah.
When you read the questions beforehand, you're priming your brain to listen for specific information.
Oh, I see, I see.
It's like having a mental roadmap of what to expect.
Oh, okay. Like knowing what kind of clues you're looking for in a detective novel.
Exactly. And while you're reading those questions, circle or underline keywords.
Like names, dates, places.
Anything that helps you anticipate what you're going to hear.
Okay. So you can stay focused, avoid getting lost. What other gems did they have? Did they mention anything about those tricky transition words?
Oh, yeah. Pay close attention to words like however, but, and in addition.
Okay.
These words often signal a shift in the speaker's thought process, which can be a clue to the answer.
Oh, so you're not just listening for individual facts. You're also paying attention to the speaker's logic.
Right, how they're connecting their ideas.
And here's another tip. Listen to the speaker's tone.
Oh, good one.
Sometimes the way they emphasize certain words or phrases can give you a hint about what's important. It's almost like they're unintentionally giving away clues.
It's true. We convey so much meaning through our tone of voice, even when we don't realize it.
Do they have any advice for dealing with those moments when you miss an answer? Because I know that can really throw you off your game.
Oh, yeah. Don't panic.
Easy to say.
If you miss an answer, just let it go and move on. Dwelling on it will only distract you. You can always go back and try to answer it later if you have time.
So much easier said than done, though, right? Especially when that clock is ticking. Did they offer any strategies for staying calm, focused under pressure?
They recommended practicing mindfulness techniques, like taking deep breaths or visualizing yourself succeeding. It's about training your mind to stay present and not get overwhelmed by the pressure.
So it's not just about knowing the content, it's about managing your mental state during the test.
For sure. And speaking of managing your time wisely, they emphasize the importance of using those 10 minutes at the end to carefully transfer your answers. Double check for careless mistakes.
Okay, so we've covered the format, prep strategies, tactical tips, even mindset advice for test day.
It's covered a lot.
But this podcast didn't just focus on the positive.
Right.
They also delved into those common mistakes that test takers make. And I'm eager to hear what they had to say about that. Let's unpack those in the next part of our deep dive.
Sounds good.
See you there.
See you then. All right, so ready to explore some of those common IELTS listening mistakes?
Oh, yeah. It's amazing how much we can learn from, other people's missteps.
Absolutely. Sometimes seeing what not to do can be just as helpful as learning the right techniques.
Yeah.
So spill the tea. What were some of the biggest pitfalls this podcast highlighted?
Oh, yeah. Tell us.
Well, one that really stood out was relying too heavily on memory, instead of taking good notes.
Yeah.
They emphasized that our memories can be fickle, especially in a high-stress situation like an exam.
That's so true. It's easy to think you'll remember everything, and then when you get to the questions, your mind just goes blank.
Right. And even if you think you have a fantastic memory, taking notes serves as a backup.
Okay.
It's like having a safety net for when your brain decides to take a vacation.
I like that. I like that analogy. So what kind of note-taking strategies did they recommend? I'm imagining pages of scribbles that are impossible to decipher later.
Yeah, no, they actually suggested developing a system of shorthand or abbreviations that works for you.
Okay.
Maybe it's using symbols or keywords to represent, longer phrases. The key is to find a method that allows you to capture the essential information quickly, efficiently.
So finding that balance between writing down enough to jog your memory but not getting so bogged down in it that you miss important details?
Exactly.
Okay.
And another mistake they highlighted was not following instructions carefully.
Ooh, yeah.
The IELTS is very strict about things like word limits and answer formats.
Oh, yeah. If a question says, write no more than 2 words and you write 3, you're automatically wrong, even if your answer is technically correct.
Exactly. It's almost like they're testing your attention to detail as much as your listening comprehension. So read each question carefully, make sure you understand what's being asked.
It's so easy to get caught up in the listening and rush through the questions, but taking that extra moment to really make sure you understand the instructions can make a huge difference.
Did they mention anything about dealing with unfamiliar words? Because I know that can be a major stumbling block for a lot of test takers.
Oh, for sure. It's natural to freeze up when you hear a word you don't recognize.
Yeah.
But they cautioned against getting too hung up on individual words. The goal is to understand the overall context, not every single word.
Right. And often you can figure out the meaning from the surrounding, like from the context.
Exactly. And they gave some practical advice for dealing with those moments, like try to identify the part of speech. Is it a noun, a verb, an adjective? That can give you clues about the meaning, and also listen for synonyms or explanations that the speaker might provide.
Okay.
Sometimes they'll actually define the word for you without you even realizing it. It seems like a lot of this boils down to, like, staying calm, focused, and using those critical thinking skills to navigate those challenges of the test.
For sure. It's not just about listening passively. It's about actively engaging with the information and using strategies to decode the meaning.
So speaking of decoding, they also addressed the issue of dealing with different accents.
Yeah.
Did they offer any specific tips for that?
Well, this might sound obvious, but expose yourself to a variety of English accents before the test.
Okay, how do you do that?
Watch movies, TV shows from different English-speaking countries.
Okay.
Listen to podcasts with diverse hosts,
Right.
and even practice with online resources that feature different accents.
Okay, so it's just like anything else. The more you practice, the more comfortable you become.
Right. If you're used to hearing, like, only American English, make an effort to also listen to British, Australian, Canadian.
All the accents. Did they mention any specific resources for accent practice?
Yeah. Websites like the BBC Learning English, the British Council, they have excellent resources for practicing with different accents.
Yeah.
And apps like IELTS Prep, Road to IELTS, they offer mock tests, interactive exercises, all that good stuff.
Okay, so we talked about note-taking, following instructions, dealing with unfamiliar words, practicing with different accents. What other common mistakes did they highlight? Did they go into any detail about the answer transfer process? Because that seems like another area where things could go wrong.
Oh, yeah. They emphasized using those 10 minutes at the end wisely, not just to transfer your answers, but to double-check for any careless errors.
Like what?
Misspellings, incorrect word counts.
It's so easy to rush through that part, especially when you feel that time pressure.
Oh, yeah. They suggested treating those 10 minutes like a separate mini-test. Approach it with the same level of focus and attention to detail as you did with the listening sections. Proofread your answers carefully, just as you would with any important written document.
It's easy to overlook those small details when you're under pressure, but they can really impact your overall score. Did they mention anything about guessing on questions you're not sure about? Because I know some tests penalize you for incorrect answers.
They were very clear about that. There's no penalty for incorrect answers on the IELTS listening test.
Oh.
So answer every question, even if you have to guess.
Okay, so always better to take a chance than to leave it blank.
Always.
Okay. Did they touch on any other common mistakes?
One more that I found really insightful was the tendency to get fixated on a single word or phrase that you don't understand.
Yeah.
It's easy to get stuck on that one word and miss the rest of the information being presented.
Yeah, your brain just latches onto it trying to figure out what it means while the rest of the recording just goes.
Right. Train yourself to let go of those moments and focus on the bigger picture. Trust that even if you miss a few words, you can usually glean the main idea from the surrounding context.
So don't let those little moments of uncertainty derail your whole listening experience.
Right.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in terms of potential pitfalls. Did the podcast offer any specific strategies for overcoming these challenges?
They did, and that's what we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive.
All right, I'm ready to talk solutions. We've spent a lot of time on what could go wrong, but now let's focus on how to make things go right.
Yeah, let's get tactical.
I'm really interested in what the podcast suggests for those moments when you feel lost or overwhelmed during the test.
Yeah, those could be tough.
Because I know from my own experience, those feelings of panic can really sabotage your performance.
Oh, for sure.
Did they have any advice for staying calm and focused when the pressure's on?
You know what they suggested? Mindfulness techniques.
What?
Yeah.
Like deep breathing.
Yeah, deep breathing, visualization, even meditation.
So it's not just about cramming vocabulary and doing listening drills. It's about training your mind to stay present, focused.
Exactly. It's a mental game as much as it is a test of your listening skills.
Right.
If you can learn to manage your anxiety, stay calm under pressure, you'll be much better equipped to handle the challenges of the test.
It's like those athletes who train their minds as well as their bodies to perform at their best.
Right.
Did they offer any specific techniques? Like how do you incorporate mindfulness into like IELTS prep?
Just set aside a few minutes each day to practice mindfulness exercises.
Okay.
Even 5 or 10 minutes of focused breathing or meditation can make a difference.
No.
And they also recommended using visualization techniques to mentally rehearse the test experience.
So imagine yourself sitting in the exam room, feeling calm, confident, listening attentively, answering questions with ease.
Exactly. Create a positive mental association with the test experience so when you actually sit down to take the exam, you're more prepared, less anxious.
I love that. It's like giving yourself a mental pep talk before the big game.
Right.
Did they offer any other practical strategies for tackling those tricky areas we discussed? What about those diagram labeling questions? You said those were tough for you. Did they have any tips for those?
They did. Familiarize yourself with different types of diagrams and maps before the test.
So you're not just practicing your listening skills, but you're also practicing your visual literacy skills.
Right. Look at maps, floor plans, diagrams of machines, anything that might come up.
Oh, okay.
The more familiar you are with those visual representations of information, the easier it will be to process them during the listening test.
It's about being prepared for anything that might be thrown your way.
Exactly.
What about dealing with unfamiliar words? Did they have any advice beyond just trying to guess the meaning from the context?
Yeah. Expand your vocabulary strategically. Instead of trying to learn every word in the dictionary, focus on building your vocabulary around common IELTS themes.
So topics like education, technology, the environment.
Yeah, healthcare, stuff like that. Look for reading materials. Listen to podcasts on those topics. Pay attention to the vocabulary they use.
Okay.
Make flashcards. Use vocabulary building apps.
So it's about working smarter, not harder.
Exactly.
You're focusing your efforts on the areas that are most likely to show up.
For sure.
Speaking of focus, they also gave some great advice for staying on track during those long listening sections. Because I know, I tend to zone out sometimes.
Yeah, I too.
Especially if the topic's not that interesting.
Yeah.
Do they have any tips for combating that?
Make the listening exercises more interactive.
What do you mean?
So instead of just passively listening to a recording, try to actively engage with the material.
So take notes.
Yeah, take notes, summarize what you're hearing, ask yourself questions about the content.
Okay. So you're turning that listening exercise into more of an active, mental workout.
Exactly. The more engaged you are with the material, the less likely you are to zone out.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like the difference between, reading a textbook passively versus actively highlighting key points and taking notes.
Yeah, exactly.
The active approach forces you to stay engaged.
For sure.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We explore the structure of the IELTS listening test, unpacked common mistakes, learned some strategies. What are your biggest takeaways? What's resonating with you the most?
I think the biggest takeaway for me is the importance of approaching the IELTS listening test strategically.
Mm.
It's not just about having good listening skills.
Right.
It's about understanding the format of the test, anticipating those types of questions, developing strategies for managing your time, your anxiety.
It's about seeing the test as a puzzle to be solved rather than a hurdle to be overcome.
Exactly.
And the good news is with the right approach, consistent practice, anyone can improve their listening skills and get that score they want.
And remember, this deep dive was just the starting point. It's up to you to take these insights and apply them to your own IELTS journey.
Yeah, experiment with different strategies. Find what works best for you. And most importantly, don't give up.
Don't give up.
I love that. It's all about taking ownership of your learning process and being persistent. And, who knows, maybe by mastering this IELTS listening test, you'll not only achieve your academic goals, but you'll become a more confident and effective communicator in all areas of your life.
It's a valuable skill.
It really is. Well, on that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the world of IELTS listening. We hope you found it insightful and empowering.
Yeah, and until next time, happy listening.
Happy listening.